First of all, I hope everyone had a great 4th of July vacation, etc. And I don't know, if you did take some time off, it's a nice time of year to do so. But in all seriousness, again, we do appreciate you guys taking the time to come on to these learning events. And for me, I do quite a few of them, and my stuff, just because I do the same type of topics and I kind of come up with the same things. We do like to bring different speakers in, and that's part of why we have Mark Goldberg in. Mark Goldberg's a guy that's been in long-term care longer than I have, and I've been around a while. So with some 30 plus years, with 32 years, I think Mark's been in the business. He's trained many classes, many agencies. He's basically been instrumental in the production of hundreds of millions of long-term care sales, just like a Golden Care. He's trained thousands of agents, again, just like a Golden Care, just a different voice. He's been around quite a while. He knows long-term care inside and out. And for the first time, I think he'll enjoy this, but he's one of those long-term care ninja assassins out there. So he knows this stuff inside out and backwards. And we do, when we put webinars together, our sincerest hope is that you do pick up a couple sales tips, a couple tidbits, a couple little things here and there can really make a difference in some presentations. So with us doing as many as we do, we just want to give the form to someone else, because I'm just a big believer in this industry in general. We don't care if, maybe Mark works for a different agency or et cetera. It's just, we're all kind of helping each other at some point. That's kind of what this is. So without that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you here because we are at the top of the hour. So Mark Goldberg, go ahead and enlighten us with your...
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jeffrey. I think you found about 14 different ways to call me old in that introduction, but that's okay.
Oh.
You did it in a polite way, and I can't argue with you about that. Old is what I am. So welcome, everyone. This is part 2. So if you, for whatever chance didn't have the opportunity to hear part 1, you can request that of Golden Care. They have that recorded from about 2 weeks ago when we did part 1 of how to be the best long-term care specialist, interviewer, field underwriter. That's the that we started to talk about, and we got halfway through the interview on our last session, and now I want to take you through the second half of the session. That's the purpose of today. I want a couple things to note before we get started. I did have a chance to take a look at Mr. Randall's pivot presentation, and I was very impressed with the amount of creative the slides that were used in that interview, and there's separate slides for some products like Critical Care and Critical Cash, and of course Mutual of Omaha. But if you haven't looked at that collateral material, I highly suggest you do. And I think they'll share these slides with you as well. And so you can pick and choose to put your own story together. One of the things that I have found from training, like you said, thousands of people over my 32 plus years in the business, is that you need to own this interview. And so it's not about trying to be like anybody else. You need to take the bits and pieces of the interview that you like, that help you tell your story as distinct as possible, and put those slides together to make your interview as entertaining as possible, as engaging as possible. But it's got to be yours, and you need to rehearse it until you own it. And so don't try to be anybody else but yourself, and just put your best foot forward, and you'll be fine. All right, so got a lot to cover today, so let's get into it. Again, welcome everyone from coast to coast. I think it's the afternoon for everyone, so let's get started. All right, just one slide to review from the last session. All right. Everything on our last session was about getting a commitment up front before you ever introduce a product or a price or anything else, getting a commitment from the potential applicant as to what solution is best for them. Either they can self-insure, they can use the government, or they can transfer the risk to a long-term care insurance carrier. Those are their 3 choices. Your job is to present the facts and let them decide, not you, them decide as to which solution is best for them. Your job is to interview them about their health and their finances. Their job is to decide which of the 3 solutions, once they have the facts that you share with them, which is best for them. And when they tell you which solution is best for them, it's extraordinarily important that you ask why. Right? That was the slide we left you with last time, was what I call the why slide. You've got to get them to tell you why they think transferring the risk, if that's the decision they make, is the best thing for them to do. If they decide to self-insure, they have to tell you why. If they decide to use the Medicare and Medicaid rules, they have to tell you why. As long as they can tell you why, you've done your job. Have confidence that more than 2/3 of the time, they're going to choose to transfer the risk. And what you want them to do is tell you why transferring the risk makes the most sense to them, right? What encouraged me to talk with Tom and John and Jeff and Lynn and others at Golden Care to put this together was I was listening in on what is a bang up job that Golden Care does in putting these webinars together. But I noticed the trend that when objections or questions came up, some of the agents that would respond would immediately become a salesperson. And that is one of the biggest faux pas you can make in our business. If you're going to be an interviewer field underwriter, be an interviewer field underwriter. This is not a trick. It's not a game. It's who you're supposed to be. You can't sell long-term care anyway, so why try? All you can do is remove the obstacles so people can decide if they want to apply, and if they do, help them make the application. That's it. And so don't try to sell it, just the opposite. Let them, lead them to the answers to their questions, and don't, please try to guard yourself against turning into super salesperson, because then you lose all your credibility as an interviewer field underwriter when you do. Now, in part 2, we're going to be talking about qualifying them further for their money, for their finances, for their assets. We did health in the first half. We asked them specific health questions, and we dug deep into their health background and their medications and exactly what their limitations, if any, are, and their height and weight and everything else that goes with that, and their family history, and on and on and on. Part 2 is really about, first and foremost, qualifying for them financially. Now, a lot of people skip this because they think that if they talk about money, it's going to create objection or it's going to create some resistance. That is never the case for an interviewer field underwriter. You're completely justified to be asking about money. But if you don't talk about money, if you don't talk about protecting their assets and find out more about them, as you can see in my bullet here, if you don't qualify for finances, in my opinion, you're guilty of malpractice. You can't properly design a plan unless you have an understanding of the assets they're trying to protect. So plan design depends on you understanding their finances, and this is not a place that you need to be skipping over. In fact, just the opposite. You can't afford to. All right. This was the last slide that we used at the end of the last session. Can you think of any reason why long-term care protection wouldn't make sense for you and your family? No. Why? See, the question mark is your symbol to remember why. Why? Everybody asks the question, hardly anyone asks the why. And the why is everything. And when you ask the why, you just let them talk. There's no wrong answer. Just let them talk, and they'll sell themselves into why they need to move forward. Not you, they will sell. And what that does is it gives you the permission to then assume that they're going to make an application. Because if they can tell you, yes, I think transferring the risk makes the most sense, here's why, then there's no reason for you to think that you're not going to take the application, because they just told you this is the best solution for them. So again, as I go through the rest of the slides, I'm going to be saying things like, as we're getting your application going, as we're waiting to hear back whether you're approved, I'm going to assume they're making an application all the way through because they just told me that makes the most sense and why. This is the most powerful slide in the entire interviews. That's why I focus on it so much. So please remember to ask the why when you see the question mark. Okay. Today's session, I'm going to go in and out of the webinar. Last time I pretty much went through it, but it's just too many important points to make on these different sections. So I'm going to go in and out. Now, when we all went to the webinar approach, everybody at first was very skeptical. Oh, you can't do this if you're not sitting across them, if you're not looking them in the eye, if you're not able to reach out and touch them, etc. And of course, nothing could have been further from the truth. And certainly the buyers out there have all been educated to look at all kinds of products this way. And certainly my team, and I'm sure all of you don't have any problem not only selling traditional long-term care or interviewing to get traditional long-term care, but also in getting the hybrid business this way. I don't get any resistance to people moving $250,000 into a hybrid program if that's what they've decided is the best solution for them. After all, they're not moving it to you, they're moving it to a multi-billion-dollar carrier. So it's just simply not an issue, and it only becomes one if you make it one in your mind. Certainly not in the client's mind, because this is what they're used to doing. We all use Amazon today, and whoever else that we buy things from online. It's very, very common to do. But there are advantages to using a virtual presentation that I frankly didn't realize until I got into it. And I also wanted to make sure that you're taking full advantage of that. First off, the use of software in your program, interactive software, engages your clients in ways that you wouldn't be able to if you were sitting with a laptop across the kitchen table from them. Software can be your best friend, and it can help you make it more interactive for the client. And so certain tools that I use, as you're going to see, I use the Genworth cost of care chart. I use the pre-qualification. I have a pre-qualification chart that Golden Care has as well. I'll show it to you in a second. I'll use the carrier software for underwriting so they can see the different meds and the height and weight chart if needed. I don't have to use it every time, but I have it to be able to use it. I use Stratecision to do all my quoting because it also lets me do the comparing against the competition. So it allows me to, or the different carriers, so I can show them why it is I'm recommending what I am. And I'm, of course, a big fan of electronic applications through the webinar. And again, it gets the client much more involved than when you're trying to complete a paper application. So all of those are great tools, and you need to take advantage of them in the virtual world. Okay. So as I said, when I come out of that slide, does long-term care insurance sound like something you can benefit from if you can qualify for it? And they say yes, and I say why, right? And they answer that. I say, okay, so let's take a look at what it costs. And almost everybody should have access, not just Google it, to the Genworth cost of care survey. And all you have to do, if you haven't used this, is just go down here. The reason I like this one more than some of the others out there is that it will break it down to the client's zip code. So you just put in the applicant zip code, right? Here's my zip code. And then when you hit to compare, right? So now it will go look at, oops, what happened? It disappeared. Okay, there we go. And then it's monthly. And if all I have to do is come down here and hit compare, and oops, that gives me a chance to compare again. Why isn't it working? Anyway, when you come here, you'll be able to see what the actual cost is for a nursing home in that zip code. So that's very impressive to the client. So they can see exactly what it's going to be in their zip code for homemaker services and so forth and so on. So again, the Genworth cost of care calculator, go get it. It'll show you all the costs. It's updated all the time. It's a great way to not only show them what the cost is, but what the cost will probably be when they need it. So on this little chart here, if they're 60 years old and the average age of a person needing this is 80, I just moved this up, the chart here. Whoops, I just moved this, there it is. I just moved this chart up to 20 years. And now I see what the cost is 20 years from now. Oops, I'm having a problem with my mouse today, but okay. And now here's the cost 20 years from now. So here's the cost today, and here's the cost 20 years from now. As you can see, it pretty much doubles, but it gives them an idea of what they should be thinking about when you get into the plan design. Okay, so that's the cost of care calculator, and I strongly encourage you to use it. And then this is the part where people seem to drop the ball. This has been around for all the years I've been in the business. It's either called earnings on investments or interest on savings. And it's always been the smartest way to suggest how your clients should think about how they're going to pay for their coverage. Now, today with assets, with hybrids, all you're going to do is reposition assets. You're not spending any money. You're just moving money from one account to another. So that's one way to do it. But there's no premium and there's no risk. You're moving the money from one account to the other. It's still their money, and they can get access to it if they need. Or if they're going to do the traditional, the only way, and this is what I say to my clients, the only way I want them to consider any kind of plan is if we do so using the monies they're earning on their monies. Not all of it, just a fraction of it, but the monies they're earning on their monies. I never want them to spend principal. And if they have to spend principal, I will be the first one to tell them they shouldn't get this. Now, statements like that help you build your credibility. So make sure you use them. But they should only be thinking about using earnings off their investments or interest off their savings, because that's the only way it makes sense to do this. It's all about protecting those assets, and you don't want to spend them in order to protect it. So again, you say, hey, you've got your savings, you've invested it, you're earning on average, what, 5%? So that's how much is coming off, 5%. If they got $500,000, it's $25,000 a year. Do you use that money to live on, or do you roll it over and let it reinvest? And it doesn't matter how they answer you. If they say, I let it roll over and reinvest, that's what almost all my clients do. If they say, I take some of it out to pay taxes and then I roll the rest over, or I take some of the money out to live on, that's what almost all my clients do. No matter what they say, I assure them that that's the path that most of my clients take. All right? And the purpose is that, again, we're just going to use a smidgen of that money to help design a plan, so they're only using money off the money they're earning, not the principal itself. Very important that you do this. And if you've gotten away from it, I'm strongly encouraging you to get back to it. Now, if you're intimidated by asking about money, real simple. It's the same as when we talked about health. You start by asking specifics. If I said to any of you, how much money do you have? I wouldn't be surprised if some of you would say to me, it's none of your business. But I would never say to you, how much money do you have? I would say, wow, this is a nice home, or it seems like a nice house you live in over there. You know, what do you think it's worth in today's market with everything going up the way it's been? Everybody knows what their house is worth, or at least a ballpark number, and they're not shy about sharing it. Oh yeah, we bought this for $300,000, but it's worth $800,000 today, or whatever they're going to tell you, right? But if you ask a specific, you'll get a specific answer. So when you say, it seems like you have a nice house over there, what do you think it's worth? They can answer that, and they don't think that that's private information. So they're comfortable saying, hey, my house, it's worth $750,000 or whatever. All right. So you start by asking a specific, and then you take the house off the market and say, okay, move the house aside for a second. If I asked you about how much money you had in investments, but not counting the real estate or not counting the house, what would you say a rough number, approximate number would be? Oh, $1 million. Okay. Doesn't matter what they say. 500,000, 300,000, 2 million, whatever it's going to be. You just want to get a number so you have an understanding, and then get a ballpark number as to what they think they're earning on that. Over the last 5 years, what would you say you've earned on that money? At least 5%? Oh, more than that. Well, let's be conservative and use 5%. So at $500,000, you're earning $25,000 a year off your money. The only way I want to design a plan for you is if we take a smidgen of that $25,000, that a small part of those earnings, and put that toward a plan that protects everything: your house, your cars, all your other assets, etc. Okay, fair enough? Great. All right, and that's how you qualify them for the money. And that tells you a whole lot about what direction you want to take them. All right. And when it comes to finances, again, you can ask the questions I just asked, and this is being recorded, so if you need to play it back, you can. But there's other questions that have come to use, and my agents over, the FPS agents over the years have shared with me. And here are two that I think are particularly effective. First one is, do you have a will? Of course, they're going to say, most of them are going to say yes. And you say, well, did you mention the long-term care facility as a benefactor in that will? And they'll laugh. No, why would I do that? But yet that's where the lion's share of finances go to at the end of life. Doctors, hospitals, and long-term care facilities and home care services. That's where most of the money goes. And so the whole point is, let's put a plan in place that sort of stops that from happening. But I don't want to say that part. I want them to say that to me. I just want to say, do you have a will? Did you mention the nursing home or the hospitals and doctors as a benefactor? No, and let them see the obvious without you having to say it to them. Another one that's very effective is the second question. If you were no longer here, this is especially effective when you ask the men, if you're no longer here, would you want your spouse to have this coverage? They're almost always going to say yes. In fact, I've never heard one say no. And then you ask that most powerful question again, why? And that right there absolutely helps solidify the fact that they're going to move forward. If you're no longer here, would you want your spouse to have this coverage? Yes. Why? Well, I don't want her to have to be dependent on, I want her to be able to access all the help she can get or whatever they're going to say. It doesn't matter. Whatever they answer you is great for what it is you're trying to achieve. So ask that question if you're no longer here. Now, this gives me a chance to make a quick point about men and women. Again, been doing this a long time, but this part has not changed. Men do this because they love their family. They do not think that this is ever going to happen to them. I've done a lot of group talks on the course of my career, and when I have, I always ask the room, how many people in this room think that somebody in this room will one day have a long-term care experience? All the hands go up. And how many people think that it'll be them? And none of the men's hands go up. None, for the most part. Every once in a while you get somebody, but none of the men's hands go up. They always think this is going to happen to someone else. The women's hands go up, right? Because women are motivated because they think that they're going to be left alone without the support that they provided for their husband or their loved one, and they want to make sure that they have a plan in place. And so women are much more motivated by what the policy does. Men are only motivated by what the policy represents to those people that they love, whether it be their spouse or their children or whoever. So keep that motivation in mind when you ask those questions. And again, and make sure you include both the husband and wife in your interview so that you get these different perspectives, because it helps for them to hear the motivations behind why they want to do this. Okay. It's also very hard for them to say no, they're not going to do this when they just expressed why they want to make sure that their spouse has coverage. Okay. This is a survey that I did 2 years ago. I called all the claims departments and I asked them the same question. How is your claim money being allocated? Now, these numbers are probably out of date now, but because of COVID in particular, I'm sure they've changed some, but you can get the latest stats on this if you want by going to LTCi and just click under the Statue of Liberty, and there'll be all the stats you could ever want. But I called all the claims departments and I actually asked them, how is your claims being paid out? 61% of the time they were being paid out for home care, 32% of the time they were being paid out for assisted living or some kind of adult daycare, and only 9% of the time were they being paid out to a nursing home. So less than 1 out of 10 chance that they were going to go to a nursing home. The average stay for a man was about 2.5 years. The average stay for a woman was 4.3 years. The average use of the policy. 8 out of 10 people who start out at home when they get care never go anywhere else. Right? So these are the kind of stats that help them understand the importance of what they need to cover and how you're going to design a plan. So I share these stats with them if they want. And again, if you want to update them, for those of you who know Bill Comfort has a famous line that he always teaches in LTC, which is he gives out the statistic 54%. And people go, what does that mean? He says 54% of all statistics are made up. And that's the truth. Anybody can give you any statistic that they want and find a source for it. But the statistics never motivate anybody to take a move or make a move. This is just so that you plant seeds as to why, first and foremost, designing to make sure they're covered for home care and community and assistant care is much smarter than concerned about whether or not they're going to cover the entire cost of a nursing home. Right? And in fact, that 8 out of 10 people stay at home is a enlightening fact for them. All right. So then we get into, let's talk about a policy itself. Well, plans are based on your age when you apply. That's why it's so important that we're looking at this now. Your health, which you've shared with me, sounds like we can make an application. But again, that's why I need you to be as candid as possible with me about your health, because the more I know, the more I can make sure I can help you get the best carrier and the best products at the best cost. And then what benefits you choose. Okay, I always say it, I'm going to be very conservative in what I recommend. You can tell me if you want more, but I'm going to be conservative because I want to make sure first and foremost, this is affordable for you. All right, now, these are the decisions you got to make. How much will the policy pay me each month? How long will the benefits be paid? Do I need an inflation rider? If they're 60 plus, I tell them, in all likelihood, you do not need an inflation rider. Inflation is the most expensive part of any long-term care policy. The inflation rider is the single most expensive component, always. And so in many cases, you can actually build in the inflation, double the benefits, and still pay less than what the cost will cost with the inflation rider. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. And if they're under 60 and they're in a partnership state and that's important to them, then I'll discuss why we might put an inflation rider. But if I do, it's usually only the 1% inflation. I'm not looking to add the 3% unless they tell me that's what they want. If they tell me that's what they want, then fine. Right? And then what your deductible is. And by the way, I have a way that we can sort of work around this, and I'll share that with you too. So now, let's talk about plan design. Now, this could be a webinar all into itself, easily be a webinar, right? And I'll talk about it with the Golden Care people, but this could easily be a 45-minute session by itself. Here's some quick tips though on this. I am a huge fan of co-insuring this risk. All of your clients are going to have money coming in from other sources, whether they're at home or in a facility. There's no reason they have to cover every potential possibility or be overinsured. Now, that's what I'm going to tell them. If they tell me, no, my mom went for 18 years and I want to make sure I have a lifetime policy, great. I will design for something for them that way. But I'm going to tell them that it's been my experience that co-insuring for this risk is a really good strategy for how to address this. Because they're going to have Social Security, they're going to have the monies coming in off their investments. That money's coming in no matter where they happen to be living. Affordability is the most important thing. Now, you don't need to say that to them. You can just stress that you want to design for it. But trust me when I tell you that if you show them something that's going to put them in sticker shock, they're not going to hear anything else that you say. So it's very important that you design for something they're going to feel is affordable. This is a formula that goes back to the 90s, the 1% formula. So let's say they had $500,000 in savings. That tells me that I want to design a plan for them that's not going to cost more than $5,000, 1% of their total investment. It's not ironclad, but it gives me a sense of what they're going to feel and think is affordable. So just as an internal rule for you to use, the 1% formula as a rule of thumb works. Again, if you need to adjust down because you come up with a benefit that's just, a premium that's just too expensive, inflation is the first benefit you want to adjust. If they were looking at 5%, go to 3%. If they were looking 3%, go to 1%. That's the most expensive thing. That's why when they do rate increases on policies, it's usually the policies that have inflation riders on them because there's no cap on those inflation riders, and that scares the carriers to death because they can't control where that can go over the years. So the inflation is always going to cost the most, so that's the first place you adjust. As I said, I'll show you in a second, you can double coverage most times and still be less than what it would cost if you built inflation in, all right? Next, you want to adjust, if you have to adjust the monthly amount, You can go, if it's 5,000 down to 4,500 or something like that. Again, co-insuring makes a lot of sense if that's where you need to save money. And finally, riders. I'm not a big fan of riders. I'm going to show you the 2 or 3 I like, but I'm not a big fan. To me, riders are like white wall tires. They might make a policy sound sexier, but the truth is that they're hardly, most of them aren't hardly worth the money you need to invest in them. A couple of them are, and I will show you which ones I think are and why you should use them. I saw when I looked at the Golden Care piece that they have a very similar piece to the one you're looking at now that shows that you can represent multiple solutions. It's very important that they think of you as a conduit to multiple solutions. Yes, you've talked about long-term care and asset-based hybrids, but you have other ways that you can move. You have short-term care and critical cash. You have true freedom if you needed to with Golden Care. You have life insurance policies with LTC riders. You have annuities with LTC riders. You have lots of choices, and you're their advocate, not the advocate of the carrier. So your job is to help find them the best solution. And if for some reason you go looking for one and they're not able to get that, well, not only A, are you going to fight to see if we can appeal it and why, but 2, you're going to have another way for them to go. There's pretty much no one you can't help if you use your whole portfolio. All right. Then you have to share with them a little bit about the underwriting process. You just need them to make sure this is what the real commitment is, that they're going to go through this underwriting process. And there's going to be a telephone interview if they're under 60, and if they're over 65, there's going to be a telephone and a face-to-face. And you need to walk them through that. Just give them a sense of what it's going to be like. They're going to ask you they're going to give you some words to remember. They're going to ask you some current event questions, etc. Walk them through the process. I always say to mine that, they might ask you who's president of the United States. Please, Mr. Client, please don't say Harry Truman. All right. I know it's easy to get into a mindset that you want to kid around with them, but these are nice people, but they don't have a great sense of humor. They're usually registered nurses and the like, and you need to be serious with them because they can't give you this test more than once. So I've had clients get declined because they were fooling around when you got to be serious when it comes to this test. And then you talk about the exercise. There's no more deposits required, so you don't even have to talk about that. And again, you will find ways for them to find alternative coverage if they get declined. Here's the timeline. It's going to take about 60 to 90 days. You're going to try to do things to speed it up. You're going to be in touch with them, keeping them informed. Here's all the things they're going to get. Yay, you got accepted. You're going to call and let them know. Nope, somebody got declined. Again, there can be all kinds of reasons that you get declined that are not accurate. I've had a huge success, looking at or appealing cases. All right. I mean, I tell the story of a client I have named Barbara, who was 60 years old, perfect health, did all these water aerobics and Zumba classes and everything else, no meds, just perfect in every way. And yet we submitted the application and it came back declined. And that's because the doctor had written memory loss in her records. When we went back and we investigated how that happened, it turned out that there was an assistant in the room. The doctor left the room, and the assistant said, "Is there anything else that you have been dealing with, and that I need to write in your records?" And she said, "No, not at all." She says, one thing I know is I keep losing my keys." And the assistant wrote memory loss in the records. She didn't have memory loss, not anything close to it. The doctor laughed when he heard about this. He didn't know about it because he didn't know the assistant had wrote it in. So of course he amended it and we got her approved. But those are the kind of things that can happen. So you want to share all this with them because it shows how you're going to go to work for them in ways that the average broker, the person that writes a couple long-term care cases a year, is never going to, right? And you can appeal the cases. And if push comes to shove and they do have something in the record that's going to keep them, you'll find them something else, right? There's a product out there that you can probably get them qualified for. All right, so now we go shopping. So now, before any interview, before I start the interview, I've already gone in based on my telephone conversation to set the appointment up and put together a sample quote on Stratasystem. Mr. Golden Care and Mrs. Golden Care. Okay, this was an actual client. I just changed the names to protect the innocent. All right, this is a Mutual of Omaha policy. And so I went in and I designed the plan for these people. Okay, and as you can see, everything is just like we talked about. Let me go to the top here so you can see it from the beginning. This is 61, she's 62. They're not partnership plans. If partnership was important to them, I would put that on. Again, most clients, once they understand what partnership will actually do, is give them Medicaid benefits. Once they get down to the amount of money they put in the form of protection, they don't really want it. So I don't really push it unless they tell me that's something that's important to them. Make sure you got the right gender next to each one. I usually start out around $5,000 a month. Again, if they want more, they'll tell me. And I don't know how this got up to 205. It should be 200, but let me put that down there real quick to 200,000. Okay. And that's usually where I start out again if they tell me they want more. But the reason I start at 200 because this is not 200. I am going to give them shared care. So this is $400,000 to spend between the two of them. And that makes a big difference. And by the way, 3.3 years each is 6.6, almost 6.7 years. And if you put those numbers together that I shared with you before, the average man being 2.5 years, the average woman being 4.3, guess what that comes out to? Right? The same amount of time that I just made sure they had coverage for. Right? They're getting 100% of everything, their cash benefit, I explained that. The 90-day elimination is always the standard because I'm going to give them, this is one of the riders that I'm a big fan of, the waiver of home health care elimination period. I'm always going to add that because, again, it'll save them money. Let's say by the time you need care, Mr. Jones, it's going to cost $300 a day. Well, if you had to pay for it for 90 days, that'd be $27,000 you have to lay out before the policy starts to pay. If we take out the elimination period, there's a difference of about $20. So $20 is $240 a year for the next 20 years. You're going to spend about $4,500, $5,000 to have a rider that will save you $27,000 if you need to make a claim. I'd much rather see you get it this way with the ability to claim from day one for home care than lower the elimination period, which will make the rate go up much more substantially. All right, and then I'm going to continue. All right, again, I'm not going to recommend inflation if they're over 60. If they're going to have to tell me that they want it, because I'll just show you in a second what would happen if we put inflation, because it'll more than double the benefit if I do. Joint waiver premium only costs about 2%, so it's next to nothing, and it means that if either one of them makes a claim, neither one has to pay. You can see what the difference is, $2 to have that. So that's the only reason why I recommend it, because it sounds great for them to have it. And then I'm a huge proponent of shared care, because if either one of the people makes a claim or passes away and the benefits that were never used comes to the person that is still, the person is still alive, gets those benefits, but they don't have to pay the premium on the other person any longer. So they're getting all the benefits without having to pay the premium. It makes it a great way to leverage their money, right? And that's it. And I always want to quote monthly, because if I quoted them annually, I can change it to annual anytime I want, and I'll show them why they should think about annual, because they'll save 9% if they go annual. But I always close it because it's a lot easier to look at $148 than it is to look at $2,000, or it's a lot easier to look at $255 than it is to be looking at $3,000 plus. So again, this is the way I've already designed it, and I'm not taking it through great. They're looking to me to guide them to which plan. I'm the one that's deciding which plan they should look at based on all the information they shared with me. Now, one of the reasons I love Stratasystem, and again, we can have a separate seminar or webinar on this on another date, but one of the reasons why I always like Stratasystem, and if you weren't aware of this, I assume most of you are, but if you're not, you can come here and hit new search, and regular underwriting, and you've got the same criteria as what you were just looking at, and you hit the little binoculars, and now there's every carrier in the state that offers the product. And as you can see at the top of the list, Mutual of Omaha is the #1 carrier. In other words, the carrier with the lowest premium and with the most benefits compared to the same exact plan from Life Secure would cost them $3,600 as opposed to $1,223 for the custom care, or $2,400 from Northwestern, or as you can see. So this is why you're recommending that product. You've already done the shopping for them. There's no need for them to look elsewhere because you've done it all for them, right? And just another one of the services you can provide. So I come back to the interview, and we're going to get through this quickly. Whoops, wrong place. There you go. Oh, wrong slide deck. Okay. What's going on here? Oh, there's the wrong place. All right. Why did I not come to the slide? Well, here was where we were, right here. Let me go back to the slideshow. My apologies. I don't know what happened to it. All right. We went shopping, and so we went through a policy, and I just simply asked them, we make sure that everything is what they want to be. None of this is etched in stone. They're going to have the 6 to 8 weeks to think about it. We can make any changes. They can ask me for any additional quotes. We can make we can go back and adjust it at the time the policy's approved. So they're just making a commitment to make the application, right? And then we go right into the actual electronic application. And of course, the line that's been used forever as a way to assume it is, okay, then all I'm going to need now is your doctor's name, address, and phone number so we can move into the electronic app. And they go about the business of getting their doctor's name, address, and phone number. And I'm going to need the dosages off your medication. And I'll run to go get their medications. And it's just an assumption that you're taking the app. Now, a couple of points about the application. Always get their buy-in for you to commit, for you to check the HIPAA box. In the latter part of the automatic presentation is the box where that authorizes the carrier that they can tell you, their agent, the reason why, if there's a rating or a declination, why they had a rate or declination, so you can know what was in the record, so you can call and talk to your client about that. Your client will always give you the authorization when they realize it's in their best interest for you to be told. So make sure you get their buy-in on that. This is new, and I highly encourage you, if you're not doing this, to do it. Almost everybody today has access to their doctor's records through some sort of portal. I don't know of a doctor that doesn't have one. You can go to the portal and they can pull their own records and they can send them to you. So the carriers are all on board with accepting records that you provide through the client who just pulls them off the portal. You will save at least 3 weeks in the underwriting if you can get them to pull the records and share them with you, and you can share them with the case manager. So I highly encourage you to do that. You'll cut down on the underwriting time in a real big way. And then make sure they have the phone number for the interview. Whoever, most people use a third-party contractor to do their interviewing. Make sure they have the phone number so they don't have to wait for somebody to call them. They can call, and I'm sure Golden Care will be glad to give you the phone number for whoever the carrier is using to do their interviews, and they can call and set the appointment. Most of the time, they can do it on the initial call, all right? So, in fact, in some cases, if you want, you can actually conference them in on the phone number and set the appointment for the interview while you're still in this session. So these are just ways that you can help cut down on the underwriting time, because it's the records that take so long. All right, now you've taken the application. You take some time to let them sort of come down. You make sure you answer any of their questions, etc. You want to make sure that you immediately send them a thank you note. By email, you send them a thank you note, and make it personal. I appreciate the time you spent, and I hope, I'm going to do my best to help you get approved and so forth. You should have a standard, you just need to put their name in and the name of the carrier that they applied for. Include the phone number in the email as to where they need to call to set the interview, if they didn't already do so. Most carriers have a brochure that helps them prepare for the interview. Include that as well. Include the final copy of whatever quote, whatever carrier you decided that you were going to apply for, and then plant the seed for referrals. Now, again, you should have planted the seed for referrals in the very beginning when you gave them your introduction talk. Before I completely review everything with you and answer any questions you might have, you set the rules of the game. And at the end, you said, oh, by the way, if you know of anybody who you think might also benefit from learning about this, I would sure appreciate if you shared their information with me, because that's how I've built my practice. Well, another way to remind them of that is to put on the post of this, on the postscript of your email that you send them, this little tag: referrals are always appreciated. If you appreciated my service, please forward my contact information to your connections. All right, just a reminder, put it in your signature. It's a great little piece. I personally have started sending I don't do this until delivery, but I do send a package for Harry and David. I've got a deal with them. I will gladly share it with Golden Care if they want to get access to it, to make it available to all of you. But you have like a voucher that has 6 different choices on it, $35 a piece, that they can choose from, or another one that is 6 choices at $50 each. And they can set it up. They're discounting it for you through this program, and then you can streamline it so they just get the voucher. They'll handle everything, send everything to you, or send to the client and everything else. I also use that same thing for referral contests throughout the year. I'll send out an email to my client base and say, I'm having a contest for people who want to provide referrals, and here's the prize. And then I show them the vouchers, and they send me referrals, and they can choose from the different vouchers if they want to. If they send me a referral that converts to an appointment, I will send them the voucher so they can choose something. I don't give it to everyone. I give it to only those who actually give me referrals. Okay, and then that's just some of the things you do. This slide should have actually been before the next, but post application. I've taken the application from them. Right. This is what I put the steps here that you need to go through before you leave them. If you just get the application and end the interview, they're going to get the feeling that that's all you were interested in the first place. So again, during the post application, remind them that there's going to be a cognitive test when the person calls to do the interview, right? Encourage them to be succinct in their answers. I can't tell you how many times my clients have talked themselves out of coverage because they want to tell them how they stubbed their toe in the 2nd grade. They need to act as if they're in a courtroom and just answer the question that's asked and don't elaborate, right? You want to inoculate against the kids. Mrs. Jones, what's going to happen when you tell your daughter that you decided to apply for long-term care? Oh, well, I don't know. She'll be glad. I said, she might be glad, Mrs. Jones, but you know what she's going to say to you? Mom, you don't need that. I'm going to take care of you. And she means it. But is that what you want, Mrs. Jones? No, absolutely. You know what? I don't want her bathing me. I don't want her taking me. Well, again, the kids feel obligated to say that. So I just want you to be prepared so you heard it from me first. In other words, role play it so that it's not so painful when they hear it from the kids and it doesn't catch them by surprise. You promise that you're going to keep them in the loop. This is not the end of any relationship. It's the beginning. Their case manager is going to send you notes. Whatever they send you, you're going to copy and paste it and send it to them, and make sure they understand that you are their advocate. You work for them. Regardless of what happens, you're going to be the one that finds them the solution. Right? So that's the substance for today. I'm open to any questions and answers you might have, or any discussions, or if anybody has any kind of questions that you use that you find particularly effective, I'd sure love it if you would share it with us. Jeff?
Yeah, I just went off of mute and I'm just reading some here. And I'm agreeing with them here. I'm looking for an extra question. Pre-inflating benefits typically works better on older clients. I agree with that. I'm doing more and more pre-inflating as the costs for inflation have gone up and up and up, at 5% first the industry was hard on, now they're being hard on the 3%. I don't care, market liability just said, unless my client absolutely wants partnership or has read some article about it, it is not the way I worry about designing my plans anymore.
Well,
Partnership is one of those things
they
that
don't
might
want
get
that
you in the
kind of
door.
thing. They have to accept
Yeah,
Medicaid.
right.
They're not going to want to share a room. They're not going to want to take what Medicaid's going to give them.
And then there's, okay, no, I'm just kind of going through them, not a whole lot of them.
Let's take the example you just said, though, for a second, Jeff. Let's stay with that for a second. Here's the plan in front of everybody, right? So let's go back up and add inflation. Okay, here's the inflation benefit that we're going to add inflation protection at 3% compound, standard inflation. Look what it does to the premium. The premium was 140, now it's 310, right? Now let's take the inflation out and go over here to the benefits and just, if anybody hasn't done this yet, I mean, it's dramatic what the difference is. So 310 is what it's going to cost them if you add inflation.
We do a seminar on this very theory, or just we do on designing affordable plans. You can't be wrapped into using 3, 4, and 5. I've been saying 5% is the wrong way to sell it for over a decade now. No one uses 5%.
I can move the pool up to 3. Yeah, well, that's much going to let me this. I can move this up to $8,000 and this up to $350,000. I'm still way under the 310.
You pre-buy 25 years worth. And what I like to do is I like to figure it to about age 81, 82. That's when they're going to claim. So more often than not, you're better off not. I'm using less and less inflation. I think it makes sense.
Well, there you go. I just built inflation in for them, and because that's what the cost was going to be in 20 years. And there you go.
And how about the fact that some people have a stroke? Let's say the 61, 62-year-old couple. What's to say they don't have a stroke at 64?
3 years
now
later,
I've given them that whole $8,500 a month. It's taking care of the whole bill. Yep. So, the argument is that maybe, 30, if they did live for 25 years, well, the benefit starts to maybe get big. Well, at that point, they've lived their retirement. They don't really have the big need for 25 years of living on a retirement. They're 90, 95 years old. So I feel like the need for long-term care actually will start to kind of diminish because you're not counting on that money to live for 30 years anymore when you're 90. So, a couple other things. Nothing else there, some weather talk. But if I could say a couple, Mark, the things I agree with you on. I do believe that selling stats, I believe with comfort thing, all of us use stats. And I think that's right. I use more of the emotional angle. I think that's the better, you're solving a problem for them, et cetera. Stats are great. And the saying too, my favorite one is, if I have 1 foot in boiling water and 1 foot in freezing water, statistically speaking, I should be comfortable. Well, stats aren't always the best implicator of what's going on. Medical records. I like your point about this. I usually coached my people to say, look, don't wait around for a phone call, because what happens? They miss that phone call, and then you get a letter or an email from the underwriter saying, we've tried to reach your client 3 times, they haven't answered. I always just gave them the phone number to call in when they're ready. And I coached them and said, look, not when you're babysitting your grandkids, not when you've got a house full of people. So when it's a nice quiet time for you, because I don't want you to fail this. You get 1 crack at this, and you're right. Be succinct in your answers. Be very straight. Be attentive, because you get 1 chance at that cognitive interview. Another thing I like you said, Mark, and I never did this, but I stole this from you. If you have ability to go on a doctor's portal and pull those medical records and be able to kind of fast track that, that's just going to speed you up. Because sometimes we struggle with that. So I really like that point as well. And then the prepping, which I think is, once you sell this thing, a lot of us agents, we just kind of walk on. We kind of assume that the underwriters are going to call, the phone interviewers are going to call. It's all just going to magically take care of itself. Well, prepping that client,
for it, Jeff, not sell it, interview for it. That's what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. Right. You're right. For selling, you're right. So that prepping is so big, and I did hear you say getting those records, preparing them for what's happening. And yes, when you're asked questions, just answer the question. We don't need to add anything that you think is important. It's not. Answer the question as it was asked. And I have lost clients that way as well. I think that's a very, very good tip. And then the last thing too, on the kids, I used to ask them ahead of time, is there someone out there, your kids make your decisions for you on this stuff? Or is this something that you should? No, I make my own decisions. But then when, Mark, you're right. What happens is that adult child kind of gets mad, and they say, I'm going to take care of my mom and dad. They almost feel like this policy has replaced them, because they love their mom and dad. And what they're saying with their heart is that they're going to take care of them. but they're not going through the ramifications of what that means, of
You're
actually
absolutely right.
moving. And yeah, so you got to prep the kids. I think that's a
But what I
brilliant
tell them
point.
to say to them when the kids say that, I say, of course you're going to be there for me. I need you to be there for me emotionally and mentally.
Yep.
But we're going to have somebody else that's going to help me get dressed and somebody else that's going
Right.
to take me to the bathroom or bathe me.
Right. So when I come over, there's not that painful, because I took care of my dad for 3 years. You know, I can see it in his eyes, my eyes. I've got to help him with bathing. I've got to help him with dressing. I got to get his meals. I got to do his pills. We're just doing labor for 2 hours. If someone had already done all that stuff, then I could sit with him and give him what he really needs, which is just that companionship from a loved one to talk about how things are going. And it's not that painful work session of 2 hours. I only have 2 hours to give him a night. Well, I don't want that to all be spent bathing and working. And so the long-term care just enhances that care, and it's important for the kids to be involved. So, all right. I love the points, Mark. I know we're running long here, but folks, I didn't see a whole lot of other questions. You're going to get a copy of this, Mark's points. And yeah, I picked up some good things here, Mark. Great stuff. You know, we're all in this together, I guess, as long-term care, small charitable agents out there. So I really enjoyed it. We'll get a copy of this. Mark will try to get you a list of who attended. We're still 25 strong here through most of this. So I thought it was outstanding. Not a lot of questions coming through. So we'll get you guys a copy of this.
Get a copy. I'm going to send you an updated version of what I sent you this morning, because I added a couple of things to the slides. So I'll send you the updated version to share.
Yep. But most of these are just more or less agreeing with you, what you said, these questions in here. So outstanding. And we're going to go ahead. Lynn's telling me outstanding. So we got everything we needed here. Mark, thank you so much for coming on board. And thanks to all the agents for taking the time with us today at Golden Care.
Everybody go out and create a great day, everyone.
Right. So thanks. I'm going to go ahead and hang up with everyone then and end the webinar. But thanks a lot for everyone. You'll get a copy of this. And if you have any questions, give us a call here at the marketing office, 800-842-7799. Again, 800-842-7799. Thanks, everyone.
Golden Care is looking forward to serving you with new tools, new products, new innovations, and always the best support in the business to help you succeed in 2022. So give us a call at 800-842-7799 or check out our website at www.goldencareagent.com.